Hi, everybody, and welcome to the final week of January. We are going to look at the transits that are happening between January 22nd and January 29th. My name is Christa of Practical Astros, and I'm here with Sonia of Celestia Astrology. We are both members of the Asteri Sofia Kairos collective. And before we get to the video, I wanted to remind people, if you like this kind of work that we do, if we like conversations, we give it to you for free. One way that you can support the channel and support us as astrologers so that we can keep doing this work is to simply hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, give us feedback, comment, send us messages, whatever it is. It's the engagement. Astrology is a language. We use the planets as kind of giving us hints of what might be to come. And so if we hit anything particular for your chart, for your experience, let us know, because that is great feedback. It's great kind of field research that you can participate in. You can also look deeper into your chart by booking with either of us or the other members of this group. We have Mandy Ray of Ecstatic Astrology. We have Janessa of By Jove Astro. And we have Shauna of Smart Astro. We are all practicing astrologers. This is what we do for a living. And if you like this work, then support it by engaging with us, sharing, liking, all the things. It might seem simple and like not that big of a deal to you, but it makes us feel so great when we get engagement. When we have stories that come in from readers, be like, you had no idea how much this spoke to me. It's confirmation that this work isn't just in our heads. We experience it as astrologers of like, well, how these transits affect us. And we love to have good, juicy astrology stories, but we also like to know that it lands. And so if it lands for you, if you like this work, just hitting the like button. I mean, it's like such a simple act on your part, but it actually is like really, it's just like good pats on the back that we don't always allow ourselves to enjoy, but we do definitely enjoy it. And to go even deeper, to look into your chart, definitely reach out to any of us to book an astrology reading, because we clearly love to talk about this, and we would love to talk about it with readers. So for this final week, we're looking at January 22nd to 29th. This is the entire month that we've been kind of using these slides every week now. We're at the very tail end of the week. So we looked at last week's Sun in Aquarius meeting Pluto. We're going to be looking at now Mercury going into Aquarius and meeting Pluto with the new moon there. So the Aquarius house is definitely getting a lot more attention. The sun is there, but with Pluto there now for the next, 19 years, lots of talk and lots of conversation is going to continue about Pluto and Aquarius. At the end of the month, we'll look at Uranus has been retrograde in Taurus. So those last degrees in Taurus, it's going to be still straddling that line between Taurus and Gemini. It will go into Gemini this year, but it's going to be retrograding back into Taurus. But we'll have a Uranus station direct, so some forward momentum in that Taurus house. But really the big story for this week is Mercury. And so Mercury going into Aquarius on the 28th of January, the day before the new moon. The new moon is going to be happening a few degrees later, but within that same decan. So we'll be looking at that and then looking at the Uranus station at the end of the month. So any initial thoughts on these transits for this week? Sonia, it's a little bit different from the week prior. Last week was kind of a big week, but this week we have a little bit of a lighter mood.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how fast Mercury's just been traveling just in this month. We've seen
definitely
Aquarius and now it's in Aquarius, and I quite like Mercury in Aquarius. It feels like that airy energy. It feels quite comfortable there, and it has that Trapicity ruler, I think, in Aquarius for this ingress chart that I've got from the UK. And yeah, just this Uranus stationing direct just feels like, okay, we're ready to go. Let's have a look at what 2025 has for us. Like it's the start of the outers being retrograde, and now, okay, it starts them turning direct. Let's see what you got then, 2025.
Yeah. You'll see a lot of people that don't know a lot about astrology put these kind of fear-mongering memes out there. It's like 6 planets are retrograde this month. And like, it's because the outers go retrograde all the time.
Yeah.
They go back and forth. They're so slow. And so don't let that scare you. You know, a retrograde doesn't mean that it's like going to be evil or like the dark twin. It's part of its this momentum. But when a planet, any planet, even if it's a outer planet, directly, like stations direct, meaning it slows down to then go forward in the degrees of the sign that it's in, there is like when it's retrograde, there can be delays or having to redo things, you know, all the classic retrograde things. When there's a directness, it goes forward. It's like, okay, well, that work is done enough to be able to then make some progress or to go forward within a situation, even if maybe you don't like the direction it's going. It's the momentum is carrying you forward. So, Uranus direct and Taurus, it's like Taurus is kind of a slow sign anyway, and having that direct movement can sometimes just be a feeling of freshness of just like, well, at least there's a movement in a place where there's been stagnation. So that just that simple change can be enough of a good sign to like have some fresh air and maybe a stagnant area of life, whatever house Taurus is for you.
Yeah, we've got a good week.
Yeah. So Mercury enters Aquarius here on January 28th. It's a degree and 55 minutes away from conjoining. And then the moon is really closely behind it. So the next day, the moon will be new, will be at 9 degrees Aquarius. Both of these, you'll have so much kind of signals in the Aquarius house. We're going to have the sun, the moon, Pluto, and Mercury all together there on that new moon. But the ingress chart here is what we're looking at. We're looking at Mercury in Aquarius, 0 degrees. We're looking at what else is visible to this. So all the things that are happening in Pisces, Pisces has its own pileup with Saturn, Venus, and Neptune, and the North Node there. We have Uranus over in Taurus. We have Jupiter in Gemini. We have Mars in Cancer. And then we have the South Node in Virgo, the Moon in Capricorn. So the majority of the activity is happening there in the Saturn houses and in that Pisces house. So as a chart that witnesses this moment, there's not too much that's witnessing it. I guess Jupiter looking down there and the trine is probably like the most obvious. I think on the new moon chart, we might see a little bit more, but Aquarius is kind of like on its own this time and has kind of that character of being that one that maybe is outside of society, outside of the common norms. Maybe Mercury's ingress and meeting Pluto kind of likes to be playing on its own without the observation of the rest of the sky. Like everybody's doing their own thing. Mercury goes into Aquarius and like, what message is it bringing in to then like to have that first conversation with Pluto? I think that we'll see even more of that the next day when the new moon happens.
I'd like to see Mercury there as the triplicity ruler.
Really with the triplicity ruler and the bound ruler, it looks like. So
yeah, the bound ruler for the first 6 degrees.
Yeah.
So that's nice. So especially when it does have that meeting with Pluto. But I think as well, do you want to double check my work? Is there a contrantitia there between the sun and Uranus? Did we talk about that before?
No, but it's going to be close, 25. So it'd be 31 and it's like a degree and a half away. So it's, close enough. It'll be like maybe 12 hours before it'll be an exact contrantitia, but there is a little bit of kind of a connection, which, Uranus has kind of Aquarian vibes to it. Some people, the rulership scheme was not devised when modern planets were visible. So I don't really use modern rulers for signs, but people do associate Uranus with Aquarius. And if we look at just kind of the activity and the unexpectedness and the unconventionality and just the way that Uranus spins is like out of the ordinary from the rest of them. So it has like this weirdo vibe, and so does Aquarius. So I can see how there would be kind of like a similarity. So we have a contrantitia, within a degree and a half between Uranus and the sun. So that's a good little catch. But I do just like Mercury in Aquarius, being in an air sign, Mercury feels airy anyway. If Aquarius is the connector, is kind of that, it's the water bearer in the sky. It's not a water sign. It's an air sign. It's a Saturnian air sign. It's a fixed Saturnian air sign. Mercury coming in there really does have this like way of making connections and making communication happen. I can see, especially with the new moon happening later on, what is being seeded here in this moment that has to do with ways that we connect with each other, whether that's, drone deliveries or whether that's telepathy or new forms of ways that we communicate. Mercury in Aquarius just feels like a place or a time in place for us to explore ways that we make connections with each other and to find the power source of making connections, that Pluto is there to kind of help maybe teach us that we have power when we connect as people, as communities, as cultures, as societies. Like, how do we collectively hold power as an antidote to singular power that is held in the Leo house? I like that. The ways of maybe just the communication of collective bargaining, as Mercury goes into Aquarius, conjoining Pluto. How do we share labor? How do we share responsibilities? And how do we speak about it? What's the conversations around all of those things?
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? That the Mercury looks like it's heading to combustion there.
Yeah.
Under the beams, it's going to be meeting the sun in Aquarius until the 14th of February. It's going to meet the sun on the 9th of February. That's when it has its Kazemi moment. So it's always worth taking some time out for that, especially when it's in a place where it has that. I mean, it's not as dignified as it is in its own home sign, but where it has some dignity in an air sign, and with all those significations that Christa's been talking about, all those reasons why Mercury can do quite well there and can help us, that way of getting those big ideas and Mercury being able to do something with them to bring them through to us. That archetype of the outsider and the rebel and the big picture and being able to put it into words. And what I did, I had a look at some people who've got a Mercury, an Aquarius Mercury in their charts who were born. And some people popped up. So we've got Oprah Winfrey has an Aqua Mercury, and she's also got Sun and Venus as well, and all in the 6th house. Steve Jobs of Apple fame has an Aqua Mercury, and again in the 6th house. It's interesting, isn't it? Virgo rising, the same as Oprah Winfrey. And then Jules Verne, and that was interesting because said to be
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea author.
Was the one, yeah, father of science fiction, and Around the World in 80 Days, and another one I hadn't heard of before, From the Earth to the Moon. And I thought, oh, how lovely, Aquarius, From the Moon. It was like, yeah, I'll have to check that one out. But yeah, I mean, his dates as well. He was born in 1828 and died in 1905, so really was before our time. But yeah, we still know those books that he's written, and there's being, I think 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is like on Netflix or Prime at the moment as a new series that they've brought out. So, he's still.
Well, that speaks to just the longevity of fixedness. And, a fixedness is about sustaining. And so to someone to have a Mercury in a fixed sign, it's like the words that you say might have more lasting power, or you want them to. You want the words to be longer lasting than just in the moment. They're not impulsive. They are tone rings for a lot longer time. So to have like Jules Verne, whose words were still reading, 100 years after his death, where, that sustaining of that mercurial communication from his creativity, maybe we'll be talking about Oprah in 100 years still, definitely Steve Jobs, so that's not that every Aquarius Mercury is going to be known for their words, but just it's an example of, being authentic with your own voice and singing in your own voice and speaking and writing in your own voice, especially in fixed signs. Like there is a signature of wanting those words to be sustainable through time and authentically standing behind those words. So maybe this, Mercury and Aquarius will teach us the power, as it conjoins Pluto, the power of speaking in our authentic weirdo voices. Like it's best to sing in your own voice and not try to sing in a British accent, like a lot of singers used to do. They would like try to perform in a British accent because it sounded better. It's like, we can tell that you're not British. We can tell that you're American. It's like if you just speak like Bob Dylan sang in his own voice, and it was classically not that great, but it's amazing because it's Bob Dylan's voice. Bob Dylan has his Mercury in a fixed sign of Taurus. It's authentically his, and his voice, his language, his songwriting is a lot more sustainable than the other modern songwriters. So may we all find that authentic, sustainable voice with this Mercury ingress.
Amen. Okay. Are we finished with Mercury?
I think so. I'm sure Mercury's not finished with us, though.
Okay, so on the 29th at 12:35 p.m. in the UK, we have the new moon in Aquarius at 09 degrees. And that is here. It looks quite a full, busy chart. We've got Pluto, Mercury, and the moon and the sun all co-present. No sight of ruler Saturn, of course, which is next door in Pisces. So in terms of traditional astrology, there's no line of sight. It's kind of in the peripheral vision. So Saturn can't offer any support. And there is no exaltation ruler. But we've got both luminaries together. But it is a dark time like the new moon, there's no light in the sky. So it's kind of like something being done in the shadows, and you've got the Lord of the Underworld there as well, bringing a story forward. So that's kind of a signature that we see, like an operating alone, an unsupervised, out of contact kind of energy, which is kind of the Aquarian thing anyway. It's going to go away and do its own thing. So the fact that the planets are also agreeing that it's doing that kind of supports the Aquarian energy. But it is trying Jupiter and Gemini over here, bringing some of that retrograde Jupiterian energy and the ruled by Mercury in. And it's also got the whole sign square to Uranus, which, as we discussed before, is thought of as the modern ruler to Aquarius. So there's some energy there. And we also see that Mercury is just separating from that conjunction with Pluto. So that happened just a few hours before. Go back, we had the separate chart there of when they were exactly conjunct, and the new moon we can see is just forming. The moon's just a couple of degrees away. In terms of the conjunction there, we see that as like a passionate probing mind in terms of reaching deep into the emotional causes and the motivations, the psychology, in terms of the archetypal explorer, what they've got to say on Mercury and Pluto together. It's like persuasive communication when you use reverse psychology or something to talk to somebody. It's like being very clever about the way you're communicating. And the shadow can be like the mental struggles and obsessions or fear of one's dark or shadow thoughts. And it makes me think of like the Nine of Swords, when you're up all night and those thoughts start getting darker just because you're overthinking them, and how important it is to actually catch those sometimes and not really allow them to become more than they actually are. And in terms of like the archetype there, one that was suggested was like the evil magician, like the Voldemort from the Harry Potter series, or the struggle of the mind. And the way that our thoughts can actually become, they can either help or impede progress. Mercury being the way that our thoughts work, and Pluto bringing the shadows and the energy of the underworld, showing us the shadow side. And I think we've spoken before about sometimes there are moments when we have these Pluto aspects, and particularly if it affects your chart, and how when we're shown this shadow side of ourselves, how important it is not to turn away, how easy it is to just brush it back onto the carpet and try and carry on as though nothing mattered. And we don't want to see that. Sometimes, particularly if it's an unpleasant side of ourselves, like say like with children, if they're behaving badly or something, sometimes it's better to actually address it than it is to just pretend everything's fine, nothing to see here. Because it's not always healthy to be integrated and to address. We've all got light and dark. We're not sugar and spice and all things nice.
Not all the time.
Not all the time. No, we do have those dark thoughts, and it is sometimes better to address them and integrate them in ourselves. Try and work with them in a healthy way, maybe share them with others, and just come to terms with them in a healthy way, rather than to allow them to, because they will pop up again in other ways that can then be unhealthy, and people talk about them leaking out in your behavior sometimes. Some things are expressed, they're going to leak out one way or another. And certainly in mindfulness, we talk about like a spiral where those thoughts can be at the top of the spiral, and then you start getting into this descending spiral where the thoughts get faster and quicker, and they're much more catch as you descend down into the spiral. Whereas if you can catch them at the top, it's much easier to stop that circular process of one thought leading to another, and how we can quite often have stories that we tell ourselves, and we can get very caught up in these stories, and we've repeated them, and we've told our family, and we've told our friends, and we become quite attached to the story. I find sometimes just asking ourselves, how does this serve me? What is this? If I found myself and I've told the same story a couple of times, I'd start asking myself, why? What is this doing for me? How is this helping me? Why am I attached to this story? How does repeating this help me?
Yeah. And do I still think that the story is true for me now? Like maybe it was true then, but does it, like when you say like, how does it serve me? It's like, do I still stand by that? Would I still repeat that story? Would I take those same actions? I like the idea of catching it before it starts to gain momentum and snowball, or it's like a rolling stone gathers no moss because it's got full, speed and momentum, and it just gets worse and worse. But catching them, and then the initial point, and especially with the new moon, a couple hours later, all of the significations of that Aquarius house is going to be blended by Pluto, by Mercury, and by the luminaries. And so we have, this Aquarius house being fully charged with the light of the sun, the reception of the moon, the communication of Mercury, and the potential of transformation of Pluto. And so they're all merging together, influencing this new moon. And so knowing that things always exist at least twice. They first exist in the idea of stage, and then if they come to form, they exist in real form. And how powerful the initial idea and the intention and that new moon seed is if you want to see something happen, imagine it first. And this is such an imaginary moon, and use your imagination for good and not evil, or use your imagination to build and not destroy. We all have the capacity to imagine. And so this is a really very special new moon. The new moon started at 9 degrees Scorpio, and then again in Sagittarius, and then again at Capricorn. It's 9 degrees Aquarius. We're going to have a 9-degree Pisces new moon and a 9-degree Aries new moon before it changes at Taurus. So we're in this middle of this series of 6 new moons at 9 degrees. And with this one in particular, we have Pluto and Mercury there. What is that? What is that first decan of Aquarius? What is those first 10 degrees of Aquarius being informed by the Pluto Mercury influence there? It just feels like there's lots of change, lots of war. There's lots of, struggling between technology and humanity, and what do each of those mean? We as individuals have the capacity to imagine the best possible outcome. So how are we using our imagination? Are we using it to imagine the most anxious and worst case scenario? Because our minds are really quick to do that. But we also have the capacity to imagine very mundane, functional, pragmatic, sobering, responsible, long-term, sustainable solutions to current problems. And so I hope that ingenuity of Mercury in Aquarius and that capacity for tapping into the power, collective power of Pluto does help merge with that new moon intention. And I'm curious, if you're watching this video, you're listening to this video, what is your new moon intention for Aquarius? Because I'm really curious to see what the collective, consciousness is wanting to build up. And there's something powerful about saying something out loud. If you share it with others, if it's observed, you're more likely to have it happen, or to put your money where your mouth is. And so please share what your new moon intention for Aquarius is at the end of this month, because if you share it, then you might meet people that also share that, and you would be willing to work together. Working together in collective power is just such an Aquarius thing. Even though Aquarius is kind of that wants to stand outside of society, wants to kind of be, unique and singular. You can't always be that way. It is best to kind of then tie up your network to other people that are also kind of standing outside of the mundane society, and create kind of this big net that you can then catch the big dreams that you all collectively have together.
That's really nice. Yeah, I'm going to have to start thinking about what put out there, because that's going to be my 10th house. So it is pinging off other areas in my chart. So these 9 degrees. So yeah, if you've got planets or angles at 9 degrees, or like in the 6 to 12 degree window as well.
And Venus is getting closer to Neptune too. So it's like they can't see each other, but that dreaminess, that ease, that want to connect, that want to make connections is also simultaneously happening in another timeline of the Pisces house. So it feels parallel.
Yeah, I've got a new reading that I've been developing, so that might be a good time to set that out free into the world, maybe. I know there was a good date next year, but I've kind of lost it. It came into my brain and then it went out. So maybe it was one of them. But yeah, we'll look at this beautiful card here that we've got from Nicola Allen from the Wild Way Oracle deck. And it's about broadening your horizons, everything Christa's been speaking to. And the keyword she's given us of breaking free and exploring the frontiers and discovery. So yeah, it really is that sense of exploration. We've got the Decan rulers there. We can see Venus is the Chaldean ruler, But we've also got Saturn. So again, that sense of Saturn being in traditional astrology was the furthest planet, furthest from the Earth and furthest from the sun that they were aware of, the outer planet. So he ruled the boundary between what was known and what was unknown. So it was really going beyond that, and what could be beyond that, finding out. So Kira Ryberg calls this decan the outsider, and Gnostic Copic calls it the mark of the exile. So obviously the place where the sun is exiled, and really owning that, and owning the pros and cons of it. We spoke about that when the sun moved into Aquarius, about the advantages as well. And in tarot, that decan is associated with the Five of Swords, and the conflict that can come with that. So this flock of Aquarius waxwings, they are these beautiful birds, have travelled far to reach the juiciest berries. So in the guidebook, it's telling us about this story of their journey. By migrating far away from the known, they're strangers in a new land, but they are richly rewarded in return for the risks they have taken and the hardships that they've endured. Is it time for you to break free and expand your own horizon? If you detach from convention, where could it take you? Travelling somewhere new may bring new discoveries, and of course you can journey to a new land physically, but also consider new realms of thought and feeling and where that could bring you. Let curiosity be your compass. I mean, that's really lovely, especially with Mercury there and Pluto. It's like, this doesn't have to be shadow. It can just be that setting your curiosity free, like especially Jupiter and Gemini there. And that lovely trine, it's like, let's really engage that curiosity and just let that take us on this journey into somewhere unknown.
Yeah, something I've done periodically, but have done more frequently now that it's just darker outside, is I go into my closet, which is the darkest space in my house, and I shut the closet doors and I wait till night so there's no external light, and I open my eyes in the darkness and I try to find a spot that doesn't let my eyes adjust so that I can kind of wash my eyes in darkness. And I love having my eyes open and being kind of bathed in that darkness, because it in itself is kind of like a meditation. I've got my eyes looking at ring lights and like all the lights on just to kind of light me up. Like our eyes are exposed to light so much, but there's such illumination when you have your eyes open into darkness. And so new moon times are when things are darkest, and you can have your eyes open and you can be open to the imagination and the messages that come through. But just the act of like being open to receive the messages that come in through the dark, they aren't inherently evil. They aren't inherently feminine. They aren't inherently bad. They aren't inherently all the things that we associate darkness with. It's another way of accessing information. And just the practice of like meditating with eyes wide open in the dark is something that I've found myself doing. And then the way that my body feels recharged after that is very different than a meditation with eyes shut or a meditation in the sun with my eyes shut. I love meditating in the summer. We just like hearing all the birds and the deer and the rabbits and the raccoons and all the animals that are around me in my woods, in my tank top on a yoga mat, out in the grass. It's very different than being, snuggled up in sweaters and leg warmers and hats and everything, but having my eyes open in the dark, just like this moment. If you've never done that before, this might be a moment to try it for that new moon in Aquarius, because it is something you do in isolation, you do away from the sun, but you are still open to receiving the messages. And it does kind of, may it bring you some discovery, just self-discovery, just having that experience that maybe you haven't done before. So closet meditation. That's my prescription. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never done that before. It's really nice. Oh, I do recommend it. Let us know how you go with it. And then the final aspect of this week is Uranus turning direct.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before, about how the outers, Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, they go retrograde a lot. So does Saturn. Saturn's retrograde, but like 5 months out of the year. Jupiter goes retrograde during its travel through a sign within a year. So an outer planet going direct is really just bringing that momentum, that forwardness, whatever it's been digging up during its retrograde. Now it's moving forward. Uranus is going to go direct and go into Gemini this year, later on in the year, and then it will retrograde back into Taurus, and then it'll station direct one last time. So this isn't the final time it turns direct in Taurus. So there is kind of this stitch between the Taurus and Gemini house that Uranus might be activating. But, you can look to see, if you have placements near 23 degrees Taurus. My sun is at 22 degrees Taurus. And so I'm looking forward to this of like what sort of Uranian insight and momentum is going to be going through that kind of hits my own personal life. This squares my MC at 25 Leo. It's going to speak to my chart as it's been speaking to it, it's 2018, hitting all my Taurus stuff. So you might feel some result of it if you have a particular point in your chart that it's touching. But as a whole, I think just the Uranus and Taurus story might be clearer. We were talking earlier about having Uranus here hitting a placement. If it's not clear yet what it's going to be, maybe when it goes direct, it'll like reveal like another piece to the puzzle of what its story is. And when it's in Taurus, it will wrap up within a year when it finally exits Taurus for good in 2026. But we'll get a taste of the Gemini Uranian energy later on, I think in June. But this direct station will just be that furthering on of that story of Uranus going through the Taurus house.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the stationing, I think Austin Coppock and Chris Brennan were discussing quite often, the stationing either to turn direct or forward quite often brings most of the significations through of that planet in that sign. So we may well experience more of what that story means for us, like you say, if it impacts points in your chart.
Yeah.
So Uranus in Taurus can be, I remember Janessa saying about farmers and things like that. And we've had a lot of the farmers protesting here, which is interesting. And I know that France has seen that as well. So it does seem like a very Uranus in Taurus topic because it is about the farming and, all of the decans in Taurus relate to planting crops and the whole story of the planting and the reaping and the planning and everything of planting these crops. The whole of the Taurus journey. And then the last decan is about trusting that the crops will grow and leaving it up to the storm to see. So I see Uranus sort of station in that decan. It's kind of like, okay, the storm is coming,
Yeah. And it could be, avian flu has been getting louder and louder. It's being spread more. That's airborne. If we think of just the new moon and all the Aquarius placements that are happening, the moon is squaring that Uranus there. Is there going to be a problem with poultry farms, affecting and killing off the livelihood and the sustainability of eating fowl? This is also affecting, I've seen it, like over 20 big cats that have been held in captivity have died from avian flu infections. And so we have that Aquarius energy. The opposite house of that is Leo. It's like affecting those big cats, that Leo energy. It's like killing off some of these big cats because they're getting these airborne infections. So is it tied into that? Like maybe, Taurus is about, sustainability and nurturing its earth sign and having that Uranus there. Maybe there'll be an evolution in that story of, maybe it'll be this new kind of treatment that helps counteract this avian flu that's going on to then protect those farmers. But yeah, this is end of January. So this is the planning stage of farming. This is called the 5th season where you plan out for the time ahead. Maybe it's a storm that comes through and really affects the soil quality and some of the areas in the world that create a lot of grain, grain and soil, feel, Taurus related. But I'm looking at that Aquarius house, kind of squaring that Uranus at the same time that Uranus goes direct is probably being related. So yeah, it's a good catch. Thanks, Janessa through Sonia for bringing that in, because I do feel like that might be an eventful day.
I mean, it's nice that there's that sextile from Venus.
Yeah,
its ruler. So there's support there, opportunities coming from Venus, as well as the square, the tension from the Aquarius, the fixed energy coming through there. Like you say, the tension from the air related. On a personal level, I've got these questions that I ask when Uranus does do its turnings, the wisdom of individuation, and how important is it to be true to yourself, and what price would you be willing to pay for that, and also what would you be willing to risk for it, because Uranus is about risk taking,
yeah,
and not taking too many risks, You've got to be careful not to take dangerous risks, but, sometimes you've got to be willing to take a little risk, if you're going to be true to yourself,
Yeah, Venus favors the bold.
Yeah. And we were talking about that authenticity with the moons being on the peacock and things coming from the heart. And this is asking you, be true to yourself. If you're going to be your individual, you've got a new moon in Aquarius that's asking us to sort of really, there's a lot of authenticity coming through these planets at the moment with the full moon that we had before, with those stars that it was on, and now with the new moon in Aquarius.
Yeah, if you hear people that talk about like on their deathbed, what they regret not taking action. They regret not risking things, and maybe that's because the people that risked things and had bad things happen, like they died, don't get it to their deathbed to then reminisce. But it's like, not to say you should live fast, die young, but most of the regrets are like the lack of action or letting inertia take over. And, Venus favors the bold, and Venus is in that supportive sextile to Uranus. And, if even like little small actions, to speak authentically, to stand up and speak out loud, a silent ally is really no ally at all. So just like speaking from that authentic voice and being willing to support the things that you claim you support, how you live matters more than what you say that you believe. So it's like putting those words into action. Could be that tension between those two fixed houses, but it in a way, it just still feels like it's a continuation of that new moon. Mercury goes into Aquarius, meets Pluto, then the moon and the sun come together, and then this Uranus direct. It all feels like this week is really about the momentum of like starting from that Aquarian ingenious point to then move forward. And you have all the other stuff going on in Pisces, but this feels like this is new stuff. This is a new plan. This is a new inspiration. And we're all going to collectively have it. That's why I'm really curious to see what other people are wanting to do. So it's like, can we all work together to kind of make bigger things happen? Like many hands make light work, like if we can all collectively lift things up, it might it might happen sooner. It might happen better. It might happen in a way that you didn't initially imagine it, but it happened, so there's so much hope for this. Not that bad things won't also happen, because they always do. But again, using the imagination for good and not evil, I'm still hopeful for this direct motion.
Yeah, it's very much a do the thing kind of energy.
Yep, definitely.
Just do it.
Yep.
I had some dates there. Uranus turned retrograde on the 1st of September. So that's how long in 2024. So that's how long it's been retrograde. And that was at 27 degrees. So it's only gone back from 27 to 23 in that time. Its next retrograde will be on the 6th of September, 2025. So it's roughly every 6 months that it goes retrograde for about 6 months. And that will be at 1 degree of Gemini. So it'll carry on going direct now until it reaches Gemini, and then it will retrograde back into Taurus. And then it's ingress to Gemini on the 7th of July, 2025. Yeah, I've got that right. You had some more dates, didn't you, on Uranus?
I was just looking to see how it would kind of go back and forth between the Taurus and Gemini houses. So we have this year to kind of see that bounce between the two. And, it'll be, especially if you have a point in your chart that 23 degrees is hitting, that'll hit differently from when it goes direct. It's like 27 degrees later on. So again, that direct motion, if it's hitting directly, might speak louder. So as a personal example, when Uranus and Jupiter conjoined in Taurus, that it conjoined at 21 degrees, 49 minutes. It was right on top of my Mercury at 29 degrees, 50 minutes. So when those conjunctions happen, or when those stations happen directly on a point in your chart, it can really like point a finger at you and be like, this is what you got to do, or this is clearly what needs to happen, or this is clearly what's going on. And so the direct station at 23 might speak to some of you. The direct station later on, before it moves out of Taurus totally, might speak to the rest of you. So if you have a fixed placement at 23, or if you have a feminine sign, a water earth sign at 23, that's going to either get the opposition or the sextile or the trine, you can look at that. A fixed one would get either the opposition or the square. So you can look at this direct station as hitting your chart if you have that 23 degree mark. With the outer planets, I don't really give it too much wiggle room. It's like within a degree, I'm going to pay attention to it. Outside of a degree, I'm not going to pay attention to it until it gets within that degree range. I've had that experience with Pluto, especially. So when Pluto is within a 1 degree of my moon, it gets my attention. When it is outside of that 1 degree, it doesn't really get my attention that much. Like just, it's not just my opinion. It's my personal lived experience that the outers don't really tap you on the shoulder until they get that close. And because they move so slowly, that might be why. Otherwise, they would be constantly tapping on you on your shoulders for years and years and years. And so they really do need to get closer. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, for any 23-degree fixed placements, I would pay attention to that for this direct station at least. And I think that wraps up our week, right?
It does. Yep.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us through these weeks of January. And my name is Christa of Practical Astros. I've got Sonia here from Celestial Astrology. And next week, she's going to be joined by Mandy Ray of Ecstatic Astrology. And we collectively, with a couple of other of us, are the Asteri Sofia Kairos collective. Asteri Sofia Kairos. Asteri Sofia is like star knowledge, and Kairos is like opportunity or like the right time. So we created this name, which conveniently is just as Ask. And we are a group of astrologers sharing our astrological knowledge, having conversations with each other, because it's way more fun to do this with other people than to do a monologue by yourself. You know, astrology, the astrology podcast was talking about astrologos. It's like the language of stars. And so having conversations about these transits and the astrological weather is so vital to keeping the poetry and the experience of astrology alive. So I really do love doing these. And thanks for letting me host for this week, Sonia.
Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for hosting. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.